Hello, listeners. Welcome to yet another episode of Courage Talks. The special guest today is Viktoria Brown. She's an ultra runner and an Ultraman. She's got a multifaceted career, started with broadcasting, went on to win the World Series of Poker, and then suddenly one fine day she realized that she's got a hidden runner in her. And she went on to get into marathons, ultra marathons, and then even Ironman and Ultraman. So, phenomenal story. Welcome on board, Victoria. Pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. So you have a multifaceted career, and the multiple instances where you would have encountered courage. And the story behind Courage Talks is my book, Against All Odds. Would like to hear from you. What's your perspective? What's your take on courage?
I feel that the fear never goes away. You just need to learn to face it.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's courage. So for me, courage is not about not having fear.
Yeah.
It's about figuring out how to handle it. Mind you, for me personally, I don't always think things through. So, so for me, I guess I'm lucky in that aspect that it kind of comes naturally.
Mm-hmm.
Just to go for it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then I'll figure it out as I go.
Yeah, that's a good point that you mentioned, that don't think too much, right? Because typically when we think too much, the inside demon kind of discourages us from doing something, right? So I have this beautiful rule which says, which is the 5 second rule, right? So if you think of doing something, say yes in 5 seconds, otherwise the mind will conjure up different reasons for not doing it.
Yeah, so I will always go for it first and then think maybe this wasn't that good an idea. But
That's always a good
at
idea.
that point, I'm already in
Yeah,
it.
that's always a good idea. Unless it's about jumping from a cliff 10,000 feet in the air, everything else can be accounted
And
for.
no, when you have 3 kids, you
Oh yeah,
don't
oh
do
yeah.
that kind
We'll
of
come to
thing.
that for sure. Any role model for courage? Anyone you look up at, someone whom you idolize?
My mom and dad, as I think for most people, that's
Yeah,
what it is. Their mom and dad. So it's no different for me. It's my mom was similar to me in that she would just do.
yeah.
And then my dad was the one who was always thinking for her,
Mhm.
sometimes too late. And I somehow I feel like I got both in me, so I'm combining the two of them in
Wonderful.
myself, and that I'm gonna go for it, but I will do the thinking myself,
Uh-huh.
even if it's sometimes a bit later.
Very interesting. Any an instance or one aspect about either mom or dad or both, something which you say, "Oh wow, my dad did this," or when my dad did this, I was like, "Oh."
Well, my mom started her own business when it wasn't that common for people. I was born in Hungary and I was raised there.
Mhm.
And when the Soviet Union collapsed
Yeah.
in 1989, a lot of people who worked for the big state corporations were left without jobs. And both my parents worked for those corporations. So they were both left without jobs. And after a while, my mom started an insurance business,
Mhm.
an insurance brokerage,
Okay.
which actually my sister runs right now. So she was very successful, but she knew nothing about insurance or brokerage or business. But she was just the kind who would just go for it and then take a course and then figure it out as she went. And now both my sister and her husband run this insurance brokerage, which is still very, very successful.
Very interesting. That sounds great. So we know a lot about your adult life. Why don't you take us back to childhood? What was growing up like? What were you like a child? Were you naughty? Were you more of the shy and quiet kid? Or what aspect of you remember the most?
I think I was an extrovert already, but it was more about getting on stage, and I participated in some competitions for recitling poetry.
Okay.
So in Hungary, poetry is quite big, but in the community, I was not very outgoing. So privately, I was quite reserved. I just didn't really fit in with everybody else. It was my extrovert nature was more about performing
Mhm.
in front of a crowd and not about being the center of attention in a group. In a lot of ways, I find that I'm a mix of things. So, an introvert, extrovert. How does that work? Or impulsive and, just thinking things through. I have both of those, and I just trying to make things
Great.
work.
No, that's very interesting because when you have an out and out extrovert personality, people tend to assume that you are born extrovert, but they don't realize everyone has that stage fear, or everyone has that first time when you kind of broke the shackles and kind of got your real self out without any hesitation. So beautiful story. You have had a multifaceted career in journalism to playing poker to ultra running. And typically, when we talk about these transitions, there are more people who are concerned or who are worried to death about leaving what they have rather than jumping to the next one, right? Jumping to the next one has its own ambiguities and uncertainties, but some people are not able to do anything in life just because they don't have that strength to give up what they already have, right? That sense of insecurity which will come when you're giving up something which potentially is doing well for you, right? How did you manage this, and what's the secret sauce behind that?
I think for me, it's always about following my passion. So wherever my passion is, that's where I tend to go. And if my passion dies down for something that I'm very invested in, then I just can't get myself to keep doing that anymore. So that's when I tend to switch.
Mm-hmm.
And the first decision was made for me, basically, because I was working for the BBC in London, England, as a journalist, as a broadcast journalist, and they just closed our section there.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really want to go back to Hungary, and I just couldn't imagine getting into the journalism world in English at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Because no matter how well you speak, you're never going to be a native speaker. I still have an accent 20 years later. So I was working in Hungarian for the BBC
Mm-hmm.
in London.
Right.
So the broadcast itself, we were communicating in English and translating materials from English. But the broadcast itself, when I was talking on the radio, that was in Hungarian. So it was made, the decision itself was kind of made for me.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I was learning computer programming. I just wanted to software engineering. I wanted to have a job in my hands that is not bound by the language.
Mm-hmm.
But before I started working as a programmer, that's when I picked up poker again, because I kind of developed the passion for it, and then I was all in on poker for a few years.
Very interesting. So you picked up the computer to do coding, software engineering, and you ended up playing poker, something which we tell our children not to do, right? Not
Yeah,
start playing games when you're on your laptop, right?
yeah. So again, the software engineering was a big childhood dream of
Mm-hmm.
mine, and that's what I really wanted to be from the very beginning. I just really didn't have the courage to even try to get into the university for software engineering. And then 2 universities later, when I already had 2 degrees in my pocket, one for marketing and one for broadcast journalism, that's when I finally got the courage to do the course for software engineering. But then life had other plans for me, and I ended up being a poker player
Yeah, yeah.
instead.
And I read somewhere you interviewed Leonardo DiCaprio and Sandra Bullock. How did that happen, and what was that moment like? I mean, were you jittery about these interviews, or you were already supremely confident about yourself and you were very cool, or how did it all go about?
Yeah, at that point, I was a very experienced journalist. So I started journalism in 1992, and we are talking now 2004, I
Okay.
think. So I had been a journalist for 12 years at that point
Mm-hmm.
in radio and television. So I was in London, England, and these stars came for their movie premieres to England. And usually they would do a big media day where they would book 5-10 minute interviews with media all over the world.
Got it.
Yeah, every few weeks I would do one, and those were one of the biggest names. Yeah, Sandra Bullock and Leonardo DiCaprio,
Yeah.
but from Gary Oldman to the whole Harry Potter cast to there were a lot of people. But before that, I did some celebrity interviews for the Hungarian TV where we would travel to a show. So, for example, Pet Shop Boys I think that was in Estonia or
Wow.
something. So I did a few beforehand. So I was used to that at that point. And
Mhm.
when the opportunity came up then I just started doing them. And I really enjoyed those because they had everything set up. They would have the cameras set up, the microphones. I didn't need to do anything that is about the technology behind it. I would just show up just by myself, and everything was there, and the celebrity was there, and I was shown a chair where to sit, and I could just fire the questions, and then they would give me, back then it wasn't digital, it was actually a tape. So they would put a tape in my hand and done. So yeah, those were a lot of fun.
That reminds me of the movie Notting Hill and Hugh Grant interviewing Julia Roberts randomly.
Yeah.
Well, you were much smarter than Hugh Grant in the movie.
Yeah.
You started running at the age of 40 when you had your third child, right? So the two critical numbers here, age 40 and third child, right? I mean, that's not the idealist situation when you start running, right? So how did it all happen? What prompted you to pick up running? Who was
So it was for weight loss.
Okay. Okay.
Because I put on some weight. After my first daughter, I managed to lose the weight.
Mhm.
But then the second and the third after the second came relatively fast.
Yeah.
So I couldn't lose all the weight. I started losing and then I just got pregnant again. So I started gaining again. So the two kind of added up, and I was about 20 kilos overweight when I was done with the three kids. After my first, I could just diet and lose it. But at age 40, that didn't work anymore.
Okay.
So I had to start moving, and that's why I picked up running.
Interesting. No, but it's fair to start running to lose weight, but you don't have to continue running to lose weight, right? So when did the transition
Well,
happen,
that's
right?
the interesting part. So, I believe I have an addictive personality. So whatever I'm doing, I get fully immersed in it. And even before I got competitive in running, I just wanted to get better and better and better. So I think I can't even remember. I think there was a 5-kilometer race where I won my age group, and that was what sparked it for me, that, oh wow, I can actually win something here, even if it's just an age group medal. Or and then I think from that point on, I just wanted to see where I could get in that I can actually kind of conquer. And very gradually. So it only started with running 3 times a week for 30 minutes each.
Okay.
That was at the beginning. And then my first goal was, when I started the whole thing, I had a few friends who I was playing poker with, and then they got into Ironman triathlon. So this is the long course triathlon with 3.8 kilometer swim, 180 kilometer bike, and the 42 kilometer marathon run at the end. So they started doing that. And then I thought, okay, well, if they can do it, maybe I can too. So it took me 3 years, but I got there. And I finally did my first Ironman in 2017.
Very interesting. So, being a runner myself, we all reach that point where just doing a marathon doesn't entice you so much. And then you decide either you want to go beyond 42 and become an ultra runner, or you want to become a triathlete where you don't want to continue running, but you want to have multiple events, right? And you've done both, right? So if you had to pick one, which one is your first love? Is it ultra running or is it triathlons?
Triathlon was definitely the first love, but I wasn't a world-class athlete in triathlon. So my excitement about triathlon was within my age group. So within my age group, I was relatively good. There was an Ironman where I won my age group. I also won a national championship. I went back in Hungary in 2020 and ran the national long course triathlon championship, and I actually won overall. But in the grand scheme of things, if you look at world-class triathletes competing as professionals, even though I did beat the professionals in that one race, I knew that it still wouldn't be enough on a world stage. Plus, I really don't like swimming. I could just not develop the love of it's not just that I'm bad at it, I don't even like it. So that's a problem when you're a triathlete. When every single swim session you're just dragging your feet and you don't enjoy. I just don't enjoy it. So that's my biggest issue with triathlon. And duathlon is just not as popular, so I never did that.
Okay.
But triathlon, I really like the races
Yeah.
themselves. Ultra running, I just accidentally discovered it at age 45, so even later, because in 2020, all the races were canceled in triathlon, except that one in Hungary that I won.
Okay.
And so there were no triathlon races in North America. So that's why I ended up running that ultra marathon, which was a 24-hour race. And that's when I discovered that, oh, this is something that I actually have a talent for versus triathlon,
Right. Right.
where I'm just working hard and trying to get somewhere.
Right.
And that's when this whole ultra running started. And it's kind of unfortunate that I only discovered it at age 45, because if I discovered it 10 or even 20 years earlier, it would be a whole different world, right? But at the same time, I think I'm going to spend 10 good years as somebody who is competitive on the world stage, because there are over 50 women who are super competitive at the world class level. So there was this guy who actually won a very competitive 100-miler, the Hard Rock. I think he's 52, and he won last year. He was 52 when he won. The lady who won Badwater last year, I think she's also 52.
Wow.
So it's not all downhill from age 50, which is where I am now. I'm not yet 50, but I'm turning 50 this year.
Yeah.
So it's not all downhill from here. I think I might have another 5-ish years being competitive in the specific modalities that I like to do.
Right.
And then I can just move on to either coaching. I started coaching already a little bit on the side, or just being competitive on the age group level, or I'm sure I will find something else that will keep me motivated and going.
Right.
But I'm trying to take advantage of the few years that I've got left.
So when you master distances like 100-miler or running for 24 hours, what's the thing which keeps you going? Is it about beating that 100-miler time and getting better, going one PB after other PB, or is it about trying out variety of courses? You want to go to a different event which you have not heard about. Maybe the terrain poses some challenge or something like that. So how do you go around picking which event you want to run next?
It's very hard to pick because there are so many.
Yeah.
My passion currently is in the timed events, and where you can go really fast and beating that time, beating that performance. So for 24 hours, 48 hours, less so for the 6-day, which I've done a few, and I hold the Canadian women's record for the 6-day, but I don't have too much passion for the 6-day right now. What I do have passion for 2025. So it's usually, I try to find what calls. So I feel that in 2025, what calls me is the 48-hour and the 24-hour. So this is what I'm going to focus on. I will probably throw in some other races. I might end up doing Badwater. I did apply for Leadville, which is a draw. So in a few days, we will find out if I'm going to run Leadville, and that's a trail race. Right. So that's completely different. But my main passion is definitely in the timed 24, 48 hour right now. Then I might go back to the 6-day, or I'm very intrigued by the backyard ultra format, where you need to do 6.7 kilometers every hour on the hour. So I was competing with the Canadian national team this past October, and I do want to qualify again for 2026. It's every second year that the team championship is on. And I haven't really done too many trail races. I've done a few. So I held the course record here at the local 100-miler at one point. So maybe after 2025, I will find more passion for the trails. Yep. I don't know. I dabble into it a little bit. And then another thing that I picked up this year actually is orienteering. So I started doing that, which is a lot of fun because it's physically not that hard, because you're going very slow, because you're trying to figure out where you are and where you want to go. And I quite enjoy that. The long events. So the ones that I enjoy are several hours long, 6 hours, 8 hours, 10, 12, 24. So we did the European Championship. It's for pairs. So with a guy, we did the European Championship, and we came 18th in our category, which is the mixed veterans.
Mm-hmm.
So a guy and a girl over 45. So yeah, those are what excite me. I think it's you have to go where you find the excitement, because it's a lot of work to get there.
Yeah.
Like it's a hell of a lot of work. But I think in last year I discovered that in the 48-hour format I can do more than I ever thought I could. And I'm really curious how far I could go there, because I know that I left a lot in it, and I still ended up doing the sixth best of all time.
Okay.
So, how much was left in it? That's what keeps exciting me.
Mm-hmm.
Can I get, top 3 of all time? Can I break the world record? If so, by how much? Like, how far?
Yeah.
How much was left in it? Yeah.
That's very interesting. One of the events that you mentioned, the Badwater Ultra, it's supposed to be one of the most gruesome ones, right? I don't know whether it
Yeah.
was most gruesome for you because you've done so many of them. So describe us, how was the experience like? Any particular challenge you faced? Any tough moments that you had? Any point of time you felt like, why am I here?
No, I didn't feel like why am I? It was tough. I came fourth, and I was disappointed, to be honest. I was hoping to at least be on the podium.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I met Sonia, who you had on your
Right.
podcast. She was second at that race, and I got passed by the third place. So her and Ashley were always ahead of me, so I had no chance of beating them. But the third place passed me towards the end. That was the disappointment for me personally. It was really tough because what nobody said to me or nobody told me beforehand, and what was a bit of a surprise for me, and I didn't even think about it in the moment, and my crew didn't think about it either, because I would have had the solution with me, was that the beating down of the sun is not just about the heat. It's that burning sensation on your skin
Mm-hmm.
that gets to you. So my skin was covered except my thighs. And I think that was a mistake. So I should have covered my thighs in white as well, just so that the burning doesn't get to me the way it did.
Okay.
So for next time, that's one of my big lessons. And if I end up doing it this year, I would definitely like to get out there and for a few days do kind of a training camp. It's just very, very tricky because right now I'm a professional ultra runner. I have a contract signed with Mount to Coast. I run for them and they pay me for running.
Mm-hmm.
But the guys I'm competing against in this are sometimes 10, 15 years younger than me, maybe even 20 years younger than me, with no kids. So they are able to go and get a training camp in wherever the race is and get familiar with the terrain, get familiar with the course, get familiar with the conditions, which I just can't do, not because my husband wouldn't let me, it's because it just doesn't feel right
Yeah.
to leave my kids just so I can do a week of training
Yeah.
somewhere else. I did 3 days, I think, last year for the first time, and I felt very guilty. So I don't know. I really don't know how I think I would pull it off this year when I felt that guilty about 3 days last
Yeah.
year. But I think for a 48 hour or a 24 hour, it's not that big a deal because it's a flat course. You're going round and round, not a problem. But for something like Leadville or Badwater, those are both the kind of races where I would want to see the course in advance. If I want to be competitive, if I want to be really competitive, finish on the podium or thereabouts, then I would want to go there beforehand and spend a few days there. But I can't really take a kid or two with me because I want to leave them for 5-6 hours a day. That's not much of a vacation for a kid or three. So I really don't know how I'm gonna figure that out, but that's something that we're just once I get in and figure out which one I'm doing, I'll just find a solution
Right,
somehow.
right. No, that's an interesting point that you mentioned. That your training has to happen without getting familiar with the terrain, and plus you need to accumulate the miles anyway, even if you're not familiar with the terrain. So, what's a typical training week looking like for you? Let's assume that you're preparing for Badwater. What's your average weekly mileage for such kind of events?
So right now, I've never been a high mileage athlete.
Okay.
I don't regularly do 100-mile weeks or 160-kilometer weeks. You do kilometers
Yeah,
there,
that's right.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
More
yeah.
than, yeah. So currently, it's actually quite low. So I'm doing only 85 to 110 kilometers per week.
Okay.
This weekend, I'm doing a 50-mile race, so that's 80 kilometers. So this week is going to be a bit more. But for the past few weeks, I was concentrating more on speed, and so I was hovering around that 80, 90-kilometer range. But then I added a lot of biking.
Okay.
So I spend just as much biking, and I find that my body handles that really well. So we know from science that biking will translate to running, but the impact on the body is far less.
Yeah.
And then I did a bunch of, it's not even strength training, it's more physiotherapy to make sure that my body is strong enough to handle the demands.
Got it.
So that's what it looks like. I try to do physiotherapy at least 3 times a week, if I can more. I usually run, and then if it's not a long run, so if it's 2 hours or less, then I will add the biking workout later in the day. And at least every second day, I try to spend half an hour in the sauna as well.
Okay.
So that's what it
Got
is
it. Got it.
right now.
And you mentioned about being pulled in all directions because of your 3 kids. The understanding with husband happened right up front. Did it take time? Were there some nasty fights that you guys have had?
It took time. It definitely took time. It was hard for him to adjust because that's not what he originally signed up for,
Yeah.
right? So back in the day, I was not a runner when we met or when we got married or when we started having kids. When we had kids, all I was doing is the kids, basically. So, 24/7 taking care of little kids. And then it slowly started changing after the third child into, oh, now I'm a runner. And while it was just a hobby, it was much harder to get out and do my stuff and also get away for races, because when I'm racing, I leave the kids behind for, depending on the length of the race, anywhere between, like now I'm going for one night for the 50-miler, but if I'm doing a 6-day race, that's 10 days away. And that's tough for a parent to handle the 3 kids for 10 days without a partner while working full time. So now that I'm a signed athlete, it's a bit different, because now I can say, oh, it's my job. I'm going out and working instead of going out and having fun running. So it changed the dynamics to the better. And our lives changed during that time period as well, because he is actually a software engineer, but after doing that for 40 years of his life, his eyes are not that great anymore. So he gave it up when his last job, he was made redundant. They closed that section of the company. And now he is actually making money with his passion, which is music.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So now he plays music professionally 3 times a week or thereabouts at local venues. And that's how he makes money. So now we are both living out our passions, which works much better because it's a good balance for our family.
That's beautiful to hear, because in India we rarely find. I mean, we do come across once in a while where both the husband and the wife are runners, but invariably it's just one person, because of what you mentioned, right? One person has to be staying behind for the kids, right? Otherwise, who's going to take care of the kids if both husband and wife are running all the time? No, it's very nice to know that the adjustment has been done, but I know it comes.
And I'm here every night when he goes out to play music. So, we're
You're
doing
doing a bit as
the
well.
same for each other. Yeah, except when I'm away.
That's very interesting. So, journey from first time runner to world champion in just a few years is remarkable, right? Did you have elements of self doubt? Talk to us about your failures, some of your DNF, some events where things didn't go right.
So I only DNF'd one race. That was last year, a 100-mile trail race, where I was very much training for flat races, road races, and then I just decided that I wanted to do this very, very technical trail race because it was a qualifier for Western States, and I just felt, oh, I want to see what the hype is all about. And I want to do one of those real ones, like the real badass thing of trail race.
Yeah.
Well, that didn't go well. And I DNF'd halfway through. So at 50 miles, 80 kilometers. And now I'm trying to do it a little bit more gradually. So I'm going to do a few little ones that are less technical.
Mhm.
And I applied for the same races, the Quebec Mega Trail here locally in Canada. I applied for the same race for the elite entry in the 50 miler.
Mhm.
Because I realized that I can't just jump into a 100 miler
Yeah.
with no experience with the terrain. So that was the only DNF I had. And I was somewhat disappointed, but for me, it was obvious that I just don't need to push myself to get through it. And the reason, my main reason was that I was not enjoying it anymore.
Mhm.
So that was supposed to be a fun race for me. It wasn't, I wasn't very competitive at it anyway. So at first, the first 50 kilometers I was. So I was in, I don't know, maybe sixth position for females for a little bit, I think up to 50 kilometers. And I didn't know at the time I actually had plantar fasciitis.
Okay.
So that's what happened. So my feet were really, really hurting, which I picked up earlier. Yeah, I think earlier in the season, but I didn't realize at that point that that's what it was, that it's an injury and it's not just, my feet are hurting. And so that's what happened. But it was obvious for me that it was the right decision to pull out at that point.
Mhm.
So it wasn't much of a disappointment. The disappointment for me was the 6-day race last year, where I went into the World Championship as the defending champion, and then I only came second, but I didn't even hit a personal best.
Okay.
So I just wasn't feeling good. At that point, I was coaching myself, and it just didn't, what I wanted to try for my training, I changed it up, and it just didn't work for me. It just wasn't a good idea. It was a good experiment, but it didn't work. The other one was the backyard championship, which was a month later, and I didn't do well there either. But we still need to put it in perspective that, I still came second at the world championship for 6-day racing. We still won the team event. I still won my age group. And the same with the backyard, that there were only 3 women who qualified for the Canadian team. So, I ended up coming second of the 3.
Mhm.
If I put it in perspective, it's not that bad, but I know that I was disappointed because I expected much more from myself. Yeah. But then the way I handle these things is I just go back and look at it and try to see what I did wrong. And for the 6th day, I know exactly what I did wrong. Certain aspects of the training were just not right, but you don't know until you try. So I tried it, it didn't work. And then for the October, for the backyard, I was just too tired because it was a month after the 6-day race. But I always like to revisit these things. And for example, I did in February, I did that Ultraman triathlon that I won. And I was very, very proud of myself, not just because I won, but because I was already coaching myself at that point, and I got the training 100% right. So that was a big achievement for me as a coach as well as an athlete. Now, if I'm coaching somebody else, I wouldn't have run the 6-day experiment on them. So I'm fine with running an experiment on myself and figuring out, oh, this doesn't work. And I just threw out 6 months of my work.
Yeah.
But as an athlete, if I'm coaching somebody else, then I will only do stuff that I already know that works.
Very interesting. In these multi-day events, there's instances of sleep deprivation. Have you had any instances of hallucination, any funny moments? You forgot where you were for a moment when you woke up, and so on and so forth.
Yes, especially earlier in my ultra running career. So the third ultra running race that I ever did was a 48 hours. So I started with a 24 hour that I won outright. And then there was a backyard with Team Canada. I was invited based on the 24-hour performance. And then the third one was this 48 hour where I wanted to break the Canadian record. And it was raining the whole time. And that was the first time I got into sleep deprivation, where it involved a second night as well. And yeah, I was seeing big unicorns and giant broccoli. Those were 2 very, very memorable ones. And then the track, we were running that on a track, and the track actually turned into some craft material. At that point, my kids were little. And so we were doing a lot of crafts, and yeah, the whole track was
Oh wow.
was just craft material. And the funny thing about these hallucinations is that, you're running around either a track or some sort of a course that is usually about a kilometer long or thereabouts. And when you get to the same point on the course, if you look the same way where you saw something, you will see it again. So the only way to not see the giant unicorn is to not look that way, or the giant broccoli. Oh, there was a very funny one when I was pacing somebody for the Cocodona 250, which is a 400-kilometer race in the mountains. So it's a trail race. And I was the only crew and pacer for him for that race. And I was crewing the first half, so the first 200 kilometers. And then I jumped in to pace him for the second half. So I actually ran over 100 miles in that race, 185 kilometers with him in the mountains. But that was the second half of his race. So the pace was very easy. But of course, in that amount of time, I also got into some sleep deprivation. So at one point, it was funny to talk to him, and we were seeing the same things. Like I would ask him, do you see that fox over there? And he said, oh yeah, I can see the fox. And the biggest one were the aid stations, because we were hallucinating aid stations that they are there, and they were
Oh
not.
man.
The running joke became one of us saying, oh, I can see the aid station, and the other one would ask, but is it real?
That's interesting.
And I see a lot of bears. I guess we are in Canada, so
Yeah,
bears are common
true.
here. And yeah, I see bears even when there are no bears.
And a while back you mentioned about how you are able to break records, and but while your competitors are 15, 20 years younger and they have a lot of advantage. At the same time, you've broken a 48-hour record of Canadian men's as well.
Yes, that's
Did
right.
that give you like woman pride moment kind of thing that I
Yes. Yeah, so both of those things give me a lot of pride. So in the Ultraman triathlon that I mentioned last February, the second place woman, I beat her by 4 minutes, and she was exactly 15 years younger than
Wow.
me. So that gave me a lot of pride. And then beating the Canadian men's 48-hour record was also something that I was definitely aiming for, and I really wanted to do that. And yeah, I was very proud of myself when I managed to achieve that, especially in a year where the ultra runner women did a lot of extraordinary things. So I don't know how much you know about it, but Jasmine Paris, who finished the Barkley Marathon's first woman ever, that got a lot of press.
Yeah.
And then there was Tara Dower. She's an ultra runner who broke the overall, so the men's record on the Appalachian Trail. She ran for 40 days. So there were a lot of results where women showed up and did something extraordinary. And for me, in my own little world, that was my Jasmine Paris or Tara Dower moment, that I could beat the Canadian men's record instead of just the women's.
So longevity experts keep talking about how you can, your biological age and your chronological age need not be the same, and how you can grow younger and younger. So, were there aspects about you being able to beat people younger anytime seen even before you started running? Were you smarter at work in your previous professions as well? That's what I'm trying to say.
I don't think so. I think I made all the mistakes that a lot of people make in working as a young professional. When I was a journalist, I would work day and night, and I would just work way too much and sleep way too little.
Yeah.
And eat really badly. So that's what I was doing when I was a journalist. And a poker player's life is not much healthier either, because you play at night, you sleep during the day, you eat crap. So now I eat much healthier. Once I started having kids and I didn't play poker anymore, I started eating healthier. And once I started exercising, I got much healthier. Mind you, what I'm doing right now, ultra running, is not that healthy either. So it's a lot of stress on the
Yeah.
body. But I also think that it might be very helpful. What happens goes 15 years younger. I think my body doesn't have the amount of beating on it that some of these younger athletes do, because they might be in ultra running for 10 years, by the time they are 35. And that's a lot of beating on the body, while I only started 5 years ago or 4. So my body doesn't have that kind of mileage. And yeah, sure, there are the disadvantages, which is, my body is also not conditioned for the last 15 years to do this. But I haven't seen if that is, like, I'm not convinced if that's an advantage or a disadvantage, but I just think about it as a positive thing that,
Interesting.
I'm new to it.
Yeah. So poker is a mind game, and as a runner, I always think that I'm more like a thinking runner, where I try and act smart. That okay, I have limited capacity, I have limited time. I might as well choose limited events which I want to run and conserve my mileage to a certain extent so that I'm not burning myself before the event day. Do you think having a poker brain or having been extra smart is probably been a part and parcel of why you are successful today, not just in running multiple run events, but being able to break multiple records? Do you think there's a correlation between the two?
I plan a lot. I definitely think that my strength is bringing out the most
Mm-hmm.
of my body
Yeah.
that I can possibly do on the day. So I think my race execution and my race plan is probably stronger than a lot of competitors, and I precisely calculate things, and I always try things. I'm always an early adopter of new things. So for example, I used ketones in my racing for the past few years, and people are just starting to discover. So I have a company, Ketone Aid, that supports me, and it's very important. I haven't had any hallucinations since they started doing that, because it just keeps your brain sharp.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, that's because I did like my hallucinations. So, but oh well, small price to
I
pay.
know. The broccolis are missing you.
Yeah, right. But no, I really like it. Helps a lot to have the ketones in my racing. But there are a lot of other little things that I picked up from, the advances of science and technology and coaching that I use in my racing. So I think the performance of the day is where I excel at, and that's where I might make the most difference for the athletes I coach, that we can figure out how they can do the best possible with their current fitness and their current experience and wherever they are in their lives and in their training.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's my secret. Race day.
Very interesting. Courage is not just physical, it's a lot mental and emotional as well. And I don't know about you, but when I was doing, when I did the Ironman in Kazakhstan, the previous day we had a huge WhatsApp group, and there were a lot of Indians. And so the WhatsApp group was pretty large. And a lot of people were like, anxiety and, I don't know what's going to happen, this and that. And I clearly remember I made this statement that apart from a bike malfunction or an accident, it's very unlikely any of us will have a DNF the next day. And I was saying that from the perspective that I come from a conservative background, and a lot of Indians actually do, right? We don't have a lot of money to spend. And flying all the way to Kazakhstan, piling our bikes all the way there, we spend a lot of money to get to the start line, right? So we would
Yeah.
we would not just let any ordinary situation allow us to be DNF'd. We would just push ourselves the way we want to, and obviously body might give up but our mind won't give up, and that's what would drag us along, right? Is that situation very similar for you? Are you trying to put a lot of mental pressure on yourself? And we all obviously, you've got a family, just not your kids, right? So sometimes there's a stigma attached to not getting the medal home or not finishing.
Yeah.
What's it been like for you?
So my anxiety is actually only or mostly there for triathlons, and that's because of the swimming.
Okay.
No matter how many times I get in the water and swim and do the race, my fifth Ironman, I had the same anxiety before the swim. In the Ultraman in February, I was actually crying right before. and thinking, what the heck did I get myself into? Because it's a 10-kilometer
Yeah.
swim. That's how it starts. And even though I know I can do the distance, I know for sure, and I'm not concerned about how fast I can do the distance because I'll catch them on the
Yeah.
bike. It still gives me a lot of anxiety to get in the water. The running is different. So it was very, very interesting, and I think a big life lesson this year for me, that I started doing the 48-hour and the 6-day world championships when they first started by GOMU, the Global Organization of Multi-Day Ultra Runners, which is a new organization. It was only established 2021.
Mhm.
So it's only 3 years old.
Right.
And I'm vice president of the organization. But we started running world championships for 48-hour and 6-day right away. But it took a few years for these to pick up. So I started to run these as well. I'm part of the organization because I want these events. Like I want the sport to have these opportunities.
Mhm.
So to me, it was obvious that I was going to run them. And I won the first two 48-hour races, 48-hour world championships, and I won the first 6-day as well. But I must admit that the level of competition at those races was nothing like it is today. And that was one of the goals of this organization, right? To raise the level of competition. So once the competition was much, much tougher, you can see that this year or last year, so 2024, I only finished third in the 48-hour and I only finished second in the 6-day. And that was a big question for me personally, that, I'm going in as the two-time champion, but for example, the 48-hour. But at the same time, I know that the competitors that showed up year 3 are very different from the ones that showed up on year 1 when I won with a very mediocre performance. Year 2, it was better. So the level of competition kept increasing every year.
Mhm.
And it was a huge question for me. How am I going to handle that I'm going into this race and I'm not the favorite to win?
Yeah.
Because the people who show up are world-class athletes versus the other two. And I'm actually very proud of how I handled that. I still had a chance to win. I was still leading the race at 42 hours when I got passed, even though I made the mistake that caused my downfall 4 hours earlier. So by hour 42, I was not well. But that's what sparked this new passion for me for the 48-hour, that I saw that I can actually be competitive even if the best in the world show up. So in the new one, end of May, the 48-hour race, we have again the best of the world showing up at that race, and I'm going there again trying to win.
Mhm.
I might not, and that's fine, but I quite enjoy that. So that kind of anxiety is different. I wouldn't call it fear because I was anxious about it to see how I will handle it when I finally don't win. I'm proud of myself how I handled it, and it just sparked more passion and more fighting spirit in me.
Yeah.
So I'm quite excited to see this year and see that level of competition and how I can hold my own against strong women.
Very interesting. The other element, of course, is your three daughters, right? So, do they exactly know what you do?
They do, but my daughter, for example, keeps asking, "Oh, why are you not even on the Z list of celebrities?" She keeps asking that.
Yeah.
I have no answer. Well, I'm not that famous, I won a few world championships in ultra running, but nobody really cares about ultra running other than
Yeah.
us.
Of course, I never been a podium finisher like you, but I still remember my second half marathon I was gonna run, and previous night, I called my daughter. She was, I think, probably 8 or 9 at that time, and the same day she was gonna do a cross country 4 kilometer run in her school. So I called her and I said, "All the best for tomorrow, and I want you to be among the top three." She said, "Daddy, all the best. I also want you to be among the top three." I said, "No, please." I'm just running to complete the
Exactly.
distance. It's just my second half marathon. There's no way I'm trying for a podium. I think I just finish and I get a medal of a brown color. Just be happy about it. Don't expect it to be on the top three, right? So a lot of people. I mean, there are tons of memes on Insta which talk about, oh, you ran, you got a medal, oh, you just ran only for a medal, you don't get anything.
Yeah, it was an expensive
Yeah,
medal, right?
very expensive medal. With a price.
Yeah, so my daughters also, yeah, that's what they ask me when I come home now. Did you win?
That's very interesting as well. No, but I think the Ultraman is again, quite a difficult competition, right? Any tough situations you faced? Any self doubt issues they were there? Did you have any injury issues at any point of time?
No, I think that one, as I mentioned, I'm quite proud of that one. I think I got that right. I got the most out of myself. I did leave some in the run, so I could have run faster, but at that point I was winning, so I had no, and that course record was completely out of reach. I almost screwed that up because I let her get too close. So I basically only won by 4 minutes. And the hard part was, so I was 6 minutes. I got a 6 minute penalty on the bike. I don't think that was justified, but that's another story. Two guys were drafting off of me and I got penalized and they were in the wrong, not me. Anyway, I got a 6 minute penalty. So I had to beat her by 6 minutes and some more to win the race. And I was 6 minutes, exactly 6 minutes behind before the run. So I ran, and it's a double marathon. So I ran quite hard the first half, and I beat her by half an hour or something. And then surprisingly, I eased up at that point. But what I did not expect, that she actually sped up. I think once I eased up, she noticed that, and then she kind of thought, oh wow, I can catch her because she's faltering. But she didn't know that it wasn't because I couldn't have gone faster. It was a conscious decision to just not kill myself when I don't need to. And so she came after me, and by the time we noticed that she sped up, because the online the reporting, there was no online timing to tell us that, so it was just down to my crew watching what's happening behind me. And I had to beat her by 6 minutes to win at that point on the run. So it was very hard to estimate where she actually was. And at one point, somebody told me she was only a minute behind me. And then I got really scared and I sped up the last 5-10 kilometers, which was good because by speeding up, I beat her by 4 minutes. So I don't know, if I didn't run scared for the last 10K, what would have happened. So yeah, I let her get too close a little bit, but I'm quite proud of how I executed that, and especially the bike. I won that race on the bike. I was way behind after the swim, half an hour behind her, but I basically beat her by half an hour on the bike, except the 6 minute penalty. So that's why I was 6 minutes behind after the bike. But my training was spot on and my racing strategy was absolutely spot on. So I'm very, very proud of how I executed that one.
Very interesting.
That was very well put together. I don't know if I can. I'm thinking at one point I might want to do, because the World Championship is in Hawaii for Ultraman Triathlon every year, November. And I didn't do it last year because it's a large expense. You need to take 4 people as crew as well as yourself. So the race itself is very expensive, but also, getting 4 people to Hawaii and paying for their hotels and their meals and their flights. So that's just very expensive. But I might do it one day. Now I know a few people in Hawaii, so I could get 4. I would probably bring my crew chief, and then the other 3 would be locals.
Okay.
That saves a little bit on the travel cost for them. So one day I might do it, and I keep thinking which year, I don't know yet. But that's something I might want to do. But it's a harder race than the one I did in Florida.
Okay.
The terrain is much harder, and I don't know if I can top that execution that I had. But also, it's a ton of training.
Right.
It's just so much training. I sometimes did 28-hour weeks. It's just a lot.
Wow. No, fabulous.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that we'll see you on the finish line in Kona at some point of time for sure.
At some point, yeah. I did the Ironman World Championship twice now. So I love the island and I love racing there and I love the atmosphere.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love Hawaii.
We should shift to Hawaii, maybe. If your husband and kids agree to.
No, you know what? I have been thinking about, would I ever want to live there, and I don't think so, because I do like traveling a lot. And from there, everything is a minimum of 6-hour flight. You can't go anywhere, even within the States. Your first leg is 6 hours of flying. So I don't think I would want to live there, but I love being there.
That would be quite a pain.
Yeah.
I got a set of rapid fire questions. Are you ready?
Yeah.
Coffee or beer?
Oh,
Okay.
coffee. I don't drink. I don't like beer.
What's a food you look forward to at the end of the run? What's a food that you're missing?
Oh, the food. Usually it's pizza,
Okay.
interestingly. Pizza. I love pizza anyway, but definitely after a run, it's definitely pizza.
Ultra running or triathlon?
That's a really tough one. I don't know. I don't know that one. Like my heart is in triathlon, to be honest, but I'm not that good at it. So for now, it's ultra running. For the next 5 years, 10 years, it's probably ultra running. But once I'm not competitive anymore, I do see myself doing triathlons, Ironman triathlons, and going back to Kona when I'm 60 and 70. Totally.
Wow, that should be something.
Yeah. I met a 78-year-old lady in Kona when I was there, and that was very inspiring to me. So, yeah, that was okay. This is what I want to do when I grow
Yeah.
up. When I'm 70, I want to go to Kona and compete there.
Okay, last one. Running in Canada or running at home in Hungary?
Hungary, it's
Yeah.
warmer. It's so damn cold here. It's horrible. Yeah, I would like to live somewhere warmer where I can run and bike outside all year round. So I'm kind of working towards that. It is a lot of convincing in terms of the family, but I'm working my way on getting them out of the cold.
Great. No, it's been fabulous talking to you, Victoria, and thanks a lot for sharing your personal journey with us. And all the very best for all the upcoming races. And maybe hope I'll be doing an Ironman or running with you at some point of time somewhere in the world.
I'll come for an Ultraman.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Hedel, for having me.
Thank you. Pleasure talking to you.